Hello everyone. So welcome to the Polity Pulse with Rohit Narang. So today's topic, that is the effect of emergency on the fundamental rights, will be discussed. See, whenever the national emergency is imposed, the emergency has its impact on too many things, like the legislative relations, the executive relations, as well as the powers and functioning of different institutions will be affected. So, in this lecture, I am going to take a particular perspective of the effect of national emergency. That is, I am going to discuss the impact of national emergency over fundamental rights. See, everyone knows that the fundamental rights will be impacted as soon as the national emergency is imposed. But that effect is not simple. Every student at some point of time gets confused what is the actual effect on fundamental rights when there is emergency, and this impact happens through two routes or two ways, I can say. One can be through article 358 and another can be through article 359. See, there is a minute but a very big difference between the application of both the articles. First, if I talk about article 358, it only works whenever there is an external emergency. There is an external emergency. Please remember, Article 358 works whenever there is an external emergency or the emergency that has been placed is due to the external reasons. So it can be war or some kind of an external aggression. That means in the case of internal emergency, or simply I can say in the case of armed rebellion, the article 358 will not work. In case of armed rebellion, the article 358 will not work. Now, if we see the language of article 358, what does it say? As soon as the national emergency is imposed under external conditions, that is the war or external aggression, fundamental rights under article 19 will automatically get suspended. Automatically get suspended. Please focus on this word, automatically. As soon as the national emergency is imposed under external reasons, the fundamental right under Article 19 is automatically suspended. See, there is a rationale behind the suspension of Article 19. Like, you cannot roam here and there when the national emergency is imposed. Definitely, it will create some kind of a security issue if you exercise your fundamental right of Article 19 whenever there is a national emergency for external reasons. Now, Article 19 says, or I will say, it is automatically get suspended. See, it simply means you will not have your fundamental right of article 19 under article 358. Very simple. Your fundamental right of article 19 will not be there. There is no fundamental right of article 19 whenever there is a national emergency on the concept of external factors under article 358. So what does it say? Or I can simply say, if it is an automatic process, then the discretion of the executive is not there. That means when some process is an automatic process, how can the executive president, and definitely president is working under the advice of the council of ministers, so they do not have any discretion when the article 358 is involved, because it is an automatic process. As soon as the emergency is imposed under external conditions, article 358 will automatically come in, and as soon as the article 358 comes in, the fundamental rights under article 19 goes out. That is an automatic process that is happening automatically or voluntary without any intervention from the union executive. So that means here their role will be zero. Role will be zero. Now see, if I compare this article 358 with the article 359, what is happening here? First, you need to understand that it is applicable in both external as well as internal emergency. This Article 358, or I can say the suspension of fundamental rights under Article 359, can happen both for external as well as internal emergency. See what is happening here. Please focus on the language. The fundamental rights are not getting suspended. Fundamental rights not getting suspended. But what is happening is their enforcement is getting suspended. Please focus on the words. Fundamental rights themselves are not getting suspended, but their enforcement is getting suspended. So what does it mean? That means your fundamental rights are always there. But if their violation takes place by the executive or the legislature, then for their remedy, you cannot go to court. Do you get this? In Article 358, the fundamental rights were getting suspended. Like Article 19 was deleted during the emergency era or during the emergency period. But under Article 359, if there is an emergency due to external or internal reasons and Article 359 comes in, then the fundamental rights themselves will not be suspended, but their enforcement in the courts will get suspended. So simply, I can say Article 332, right to constitutional remedies, as well as Article 226, right to move to high courts for the writ jurisdiction will get suspended. Now see, one more important difference between the Article 358 and Article 359 is their application. I told you when I highlighted the word, as soon as the emergency is imposed under Article 358, the fundamental right under Article 19 will automatically get suspended. But in this under Article 359, it is not an automatic process. See what will happen. Emergency imposed, and the executive thought that you need to curtail some of the fundamental rights. So what will happen after the proclamation of emergency? They will issue a separate proclamation. On which it would be written the enforcement of which fundamental rights are getting suspended. Are you getting the fact behind these two articles, Article 358 and 359? 358 says the suspension of Article 19 is automatic, but Article 359 says the suspension of enforcement of fundamental rights. It is not automatic. As soon as the emergency is imposed, the executive will issue a separate proclamation which will say these fundamental rights or their enforcement is getting suspended. So I can say it is not an automatic process. But under Article 358, it is definitely an automatic process. So when it is not an automatic process, so what does it say? There must be some discretion. Of the executive. That means the president as well as the council of ministers. President and council of ministers. Do you get this fact? Because you need to have a separate proclamation where you will say the enforcement of these fundamental rights are getting suspended. So you need to have a separate proclamation. Now here comes the twist. When you are getting a separate proclamation, then that means you have the liberty to choose which fundamental rights are going to be suspended or their enforcement is going to be suspended. So definitely it is something where the discretion of the executive will work. See, one more difference is there. Under separate proclamation, you can suspend the enforcement of all the fundamental rights, but you can never suspend the enforcement of Articles 20 and 21. These fundamental rights will never be suspended. You can suspend the enforcement of every fundamental right, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, note 20 and 21, then 22 up to 32. Clear? So Article 20 and 21, their enforcement will not be suspended. Rest other fundamental rights enforcement can be suspended. So this is the difference between the Article 358 and 359. See, please remember, in simple words, I can say in 358, there is no fundamental right. So when there is no fundamental right, there is no question of enforcing a fundamental right. But in case of Article 359, the fundamental right is still there, but their enforcement in the courts is getting suspended. This is the basic difference between the Article 358 and Article 359. Article 358 is something where the discretion of the executive is not there because it is an automatic process. But under Article 359, there is discretion of the union executive because they need to write under a separate proclamation. They are suspending the enforcement of these fundamental rights. And in this also, the Article 20 and 21 can never be suspended. All right. So that means under Article 359, you do not have the liberty to approach to court if your fundamental rights are getting violated. So this is the basic difference between the Article 358 and Article 359. See, Article 358, if I give you some kind of revision, 358 will only work for external, but 359 will work for both external as well as internal emergency. That means under armed rebellion, you will not have the application of Article 358, but armed rebellion, war or external aggression, you can put them under Article 359. See, under Article 358, the fundamental rights under Article 19, they will be suspended. But under Article 359, the fundamental rights will not be suspended, rather their enforcement will be suspended. That means you cannot go to court when your fundamental rights are getting violated. That means if I talk about under Article 358, you do not have the fundamental rights, so there is no question of their enforcement. But under Article 359, you do have fundamental rights, but their enforcement cannot be done. See, discretion of the executive, their role will be zero because Article 358 or the emergency provisions under Article 358, they are automatic in nature. So you do not need any kind of discretion from the union executive. But under the suspension of fundamental rights under Article 359, it is not an automatic process because the first step is the declaration of emergency or the proclamation of emergency. As soon as the proclamation of emergency is there, you need a separate proclamation from the president that we are going to suspend the enforcement of these fundamental rights. And in the list of those fundamental rights, you cannot have your Articles 20 and 21 suspended. So that means there is some kind of a discretion of the union executive, but here there is no discretion of the union executive, which we have already written. So if I ask you a question, there is an emergency due to armed rebellion and you want to curtail your Article 19, how will you do that? Because it cannot be done under Article 358 because it is an example of armed rebellion, which is an internal emergency. So what you can do, you can use the Article 359 and under the presidential proclamation, you can write down Article 19. So its enforcement will be cancelled. Article 19 will always be there, but you cannot go to court if your fundamental rights under Article 19 are getting suspended. So I hope you got the difference between Article 358 and 359, and it is one of the topics that have been always been confusing for the students to learn. We will be giving you some more topics like this where there is always some kind of a confusion among the student community. So keep watching and keep revising. All the best. Thank you.